Higher density can be done nicely with design, some simple design things, which I'm not a designer and, that's not my forte, but I can look at something and say, hey, that's cool looking. And maybe it's not as, even though it's high density, maybe it's something that's still attractive. And that's what we want. So when we've done high density, that's what we've tried to say is, hey, how can we make this long-term a desirable place to live?
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. It's the 435 podcast, everything Southern Utah. I met with Jimmie Hughes today. Thanks for coming on, man. We talked about a lot of stuff. We covered a lot of ground. We ran out of time actually, but we talked heavily about transportation and its impact on our community. We talked about a little bit of housing. We talked about the role of government and getting the word out and interacting as a public. So drop comments in this, interact with this. That's the whole point of these podcasts, is to get a dialogue going and get out the vote. So we got a big election November 7th. So get out there and vote. Primaries. You need to get registered. But thanks for coming on, man. I hope you guys enjoy the show. And we'll see you out there. To start off though, we can't forget social media handles. Like, where can people find you and follow you and know what's going on? How do you communicate to the public at large?
Yeah, so obviously my cell phone and my email are on the city website, but that's
how I got you.
I'm on Facebook. I'm at that generation that's on Facebook. I think that's getting to be the older generation now.
Well, it's majority of St. George.
Yeah.
That's the unofficial elected digital platform of St. George, Utah, or Southern Utah. Like Washington County is for sure on Facebook.
Yep. So my personal Facebook is out there, and I'm always happy to communicate with people. I get a lot of messages on that, Facebook messages. And
do you have the 5,000 friend limit?
I have not hit 5,000 friends.
Wow. We could do it. This podcast is going to get you there.
Maybe.
Okay, so you're on Facebook. That's the only social, really?
Pretty much. I do have a Instagram page. Rarely use it, so I probably got to get on that more. So I know there's a lot of people that do both, and there's so much interconnectivity between the two. I started doing that way back when I first got involved in the city, and then I just started concentrating mostly on Facebook.
So what's the Facebook? Where do we find you?
Jimmie Hughes. Yeah, Jimmie B. There's a B in there.
Jimmie B. Hughes.
That's whole another story we could talk about. My middle initial. So
Mal, you got it?
Yeah, I do.
We're good to go.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Okay, so we kind of talked about what it is that we're doing here. Shout out to Blue Form Media.
Yep.
They're the podcast producers, executors. We couldn't do this without Mallory, and Blake cannot be forgotten. Mm-hmm. He is the man with a plan. And so anyway, the idea is this: the election's coming up. Mm-hmm. I was a political science major. And awesome. Jeff Watkins and I were doing an open house over during the Parade of Homes out in Hurricane. And all day, we talked to people all day long. Most of the time, not out. Real estate wasn't the first thing, but because you're in an open house, that kind of is like the first start. But you just get to know people and talk to people on a so much deeper level when you have some one-on-one FaceTime with them, right? Sure. So I said, at the end of that, because this is what we would do. The open house, you could just have a sign out and people would walk in. But what we ended up doing is standing out on the driveway with the open house sign in front of the driveway. And as someone pulled up to go to the parade, we just moved the open house sign and tell them to park right there.
Nice.
So they didn't have to walk very far, right?
Very
good. Because the cars were parked everywhere, right? Yeah. And so then they felt obligated to come into the open house, right? Yep. Or I'd guilt them and I'd say, hey, this Captive is actually audience. A better house than that parade home. They tricked you. You're going to want to come through this. So then we figured out a way to just talk to people, right? And real estate's a talk to people business. There is a lot of money to be made in real estate. It's, as an industry, it's like $53 trillion or something like that, right?
Sure.
It's the backbone of our economy. So when you think, I want to go be a real estate agent, you think Phil Dunphy at Modern Family. But it's not like that. It's really tough business. You started as a real estate appraiser, I heard.
Yeah, I did. So real estate's my background. Yep.
And that was, what year was that?
So I started in 92. I actually moved to California. I'm a St. George kid, but I moved to California, and
so you know the California hustle.
Yep, right down in Southern California. I had an aunt that lived there and lived with her, and I worked all over the Los Angeles Valley, including right downtown in LA. So
yeah.
Good times. I worked in the real estate appraisal business, and then they moved me into the mortgage side. So I got to work with a lot of real estate agents, and eventually they moved me to Salt Lake without I was supposed to
Dude,
turn
that's
that off.
okay.
Yeah.
You should just answer it. We should just see who
yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
That'd be
never
very
know.
interesting who called you just now.
I went to turn that off, and then we got sidetracked. But
I know.
I'm
Here,
not
we
sure
can
it's
turn them both off
Yeah,
right now.
Yeah,
Let's turn them
sorry
both
about
off.
that.
I'm going to turn mine off.
You know, I have it turned up loud, so it'll wake me up in the middle of the night. So I do get calls in the middle of the night sometimes.
Dude,
So.
I can't even imagine. I would never do your job.
Yeah.
St. George City Council, I would not do it, dude.
Yeah,
No
I
one
was gonna
could
say which job.
Yeah, the St. George City Council,
Yeah.
which is why I got you on the show. You wear a lot of hats,
Yeah.
but I think you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You're a guy who's self-starter. You know, the idea is that we're going to make our own way, which is most Americans, truthfully. Like that's just like Mallory and Blake, right? We're
certainly.
You know, we want to get started. There's certain businesses you get started in, and then you kind of carve your own path, and you've done a great job at that.
That's the American way.
You blazed the trail.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on the mortuary because if you look you up, that's all we get is mortuary stuff. There's not as much
That's
city
morbid.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
And it's super fascinating. I'd love to do like a 2-hour show with you just on that because I'm like, how many people die in Washington County and what kind of a business does that look like? And holy cow, what are the things I never would have thought about that you have to do?
Yeah.
But you know, going back to real estate is why I got it started. I'm fascinated with politics. I was a political science major from Cal State Fullerton. Born in Sandy, went to a boarding school in New Mexico. It was a military boarding school. And then I went to Cal State Fullerton for my undergrad. And I met my wife bartending. She was a bartender. I was a server at the restaurant. We met.
Cool.
And, you know, we actually went to Thailand, hatched an idea to move to St. George where my parents had a house. And we're just going to go teach English in like South America or something. Sure. We moved here 2 months later. My wife was pregnant.
Yeah.
2 months
and never
in.
left.
Never left.
Yeah.
We never haven't done that yet. Now it's like a different chapter, almost the chapter where you're at, right?
Yeah.
It was like kids are out of the house and what do we do next?
Yeah.
So I was at the parade. Let's go all the way back. I was at the open house. Jeff and I hatched this idea. He was a political science major at University of Utah. He was fascinated with real estate. We both had considered going to law school. Both of us bagged that. Now we're both in real estate with political science as our interest. And I'm like, well, then let's just go to the people with that. We don't have, the Spectrum's essentially dead.
Right.
Spectrum's gone. We have St. George News, which was a Facebook page that was meant to just sell ads that had really, I don't think their original plan was like, we're going to be the media source for Southern Utah.
Yeah.
But they de facto become that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we could do this a little better. As a real estate agent, you know, real estate only happens every 7 to 10 years. So the amount of people I need to know to really have real estate just, you know, coming through the door on a regular basis, I have to go find new people to talk to.
Sure.
Or I have to have a good conversation where people tune in and they'll think, oh, I'll hire that guy. He seems like he knows what he's doing and he's, you know, capable of doing the job. So that's kind of hatched the idea. We had the election coming up. There's 3 seats, which is a massive, it's a voting majority swing. Right. And for the most part, 3 votes can win it. Right. As far as like decisions moving forward.
On a 5-member council, that's what it does.
That's what it does. So I was like, well, it's important. It's not a presidential. How can I boost? So our goal of the podcast and the project that we're working on, it's a Rock the Vote St. George. We'll have a website by the time this airs, because I think this episode is going to come out after June. It's probably going to be in July. Or even August, because we're going to go all the way up to the election. Yeah. So I might have you back on if you're willing to do it again later on as we get closer to it. But truth be told, I'm on the side of the underdogs. So I'm a guy that wants the challengers to win in politics. Just so you know ahead of time.
And almost in everything, we all feel that way. I'm that way in sports.
People are cheering for their underdog most of the time.
Certainly.
I'm a Yankee fan, so then I get a bunch of beef. Everybody gets mad because they're like, oh, from the guy who says that they're the best, right?
I try not to hold it against you. No.
Exactly. Everybody does. But I'm really interested in your perspective. Kind of the first question I would ask you is, you've been on since 2011. Consecutively. Are you running again or are you not running? And this won't be official because it's going to come after, but
no, after a lot of thought, I am running again, and more so because I've had a lot of people in all the times I've ran before, it was just kind of automatic. I've had a lot of people come and say, hey, you know, I was good to be done. I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, hey, we really, really want you to run again. And I said, okay, I'll do it one more time, but don't ask me again. So, and you know, we've got a lot of things going on, and it just feels like it's not quite the time to step away.
What would be the number one reason why they're saying they want you to run again, and that there's not another fully capable business owner or citizen in town that could do all the same stuff that you're doing?
Yep, that's a multi-part question there, because I truly believe there are some others that could do it.
Yeah.
The second part of that is, are they willing?
That's a good point.
And that's a whole nother subject as well, is what is going to motivate someone to do this job with some of the issues that come along with it, right down to it could affect your business. If you're an entrepreneur like me, I've had people come in and say, I'm going to do business with you because of this, or I will not because of this. So there's a lot of decisions that come into play with other people that say, would I run? Plus some of the unsavory parts of the political business where people just don't like you because of a decision you made. There are a lot of people that just say, hey, that's not for me, that might be capable. So so I'm okay to, I guess that's the way to say it the best, is I'm okay to step away.
You'll put your hat in the ring.
Yep.
And let the people vote.
Yep. And it's not going to be, maybe I'm the dangerous candidate because it's not going to be the end of the world for me, right? This is my community.
In a negotiation, the one that has the least to lose
that's right.
is the one that wins.
That's right with you. So, but there's been some interesting dynamic changes since I've been on the council. And, obviously I came in out of nowhere. I'm a St. George kid, but had no political aspirations, decided to run, lost, ran again 2 years later and barely won. And then, within a few years became the longest serving council person. So I'm the one that's been there the longest. So, I think the original part of that question is, why are they coming to ask me? I asked them that. Why can't we find someone else? It comes down to the experience. Now that's a catch-22. Some would say, hey, we need to make a change. I feel that way a lot of times in politics, is we need to make a change. In this case, they feel like we're at a crucial point in the dynamics of the politics in St. George, where what they've told me at least is, we need your experience, and let's get the right people in place. Then you can step away. That's the bottom line what it comes down to. So, again,
So you think that depending on who throws their name in the hat or their name in the ring, let's do the right thing. Their name in the ring, that could change your mind? Could you say, well, these 3 people or these 4 people are running and I feel like they could win it, and maybe, could you find enough candidates where you could almost maybe pick your replacement at this point?
Well, I wouldn't say change my mind, because I'm not gonna get in to lose, right?
I love that
committed.
answer. That's great.
I'm committed.
That's a great answer.
I'm committed to the people of St. George. But at the same time, I would say if the right people run, I wouldn't be sitting there going, oh, this is super important. I'd say, hey, if this person wins or this person wins, we're solid. We're solid. So let's not stress about it.
Sweet.
And I've seen that happen in the past. Not that we, not it's the end of the world when certain people win or lose, but I've seen it happen in the past when some really good people, some really good candidates have gotten, because of the number of candidates and the way we vote in a primary, they dilute the vote because there's so many that are maybe like-minded, where, there's some really good candidates that just get totally forgotten about because, of the sheer number of people. And I'd hope I'm not that guy that makes that happen, to where, a lot of times when we do that, we go to the extremes, and there are extremes on both sides. Even my side, there's some extremes. And so, we got to be really careful with that. And so I hope that doesn't happen. Doesn't usually happen as much in the 3-person race as the 2-person, where there's a little more concentration, but where we got 3 seats open, I mean, really, you just got to be in the top 3.
That's it.
So, yeah.
I mean, really, the first round, the primaries are really where it's at. So the whole goal of the podcast, going right back, just to kind of close the door on this, I want to boost voter registration by 25%. So perfect. So if you're a resident in St. George specifically, but Washington County, because Hurricane has 3-member election going on this year too, and that's a huge important election for Hurricane based on where they're at right now.
Sure,
their explosive amount of growth that they're on the precipice of having, because a lot of people look around and they think, oh man, Hurricane has grown so much. Yeah. Well, we haven't even started yet.
Sure. The land mass they have available there.
The flat, so much, like actual flat. Like you look at St. George and on a geographic map, St. George is not an ideal place to build a city. Yeah. They would not have done this if we were to pick it out of all the geographic areas. It would not have been St. George. So Hurricane, though,
they will be the biggest city someday.
And then the 3rd largest by geographic area. Sure. They have the most privately owned land in Washington County. You know, Joe Boca back in the day told me that only 11% of our whole county is privately owned. I don't know if that stat is exactly true, but when I look at the zoning map and I go backwards, that's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah.
And that's not true of Utah County and Salt Lake County and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
they got some
we have
big things to come out there.
We have a unique dynamic, and Hurricane's got a big election too. But the goal, 25% registration, will help us say, okay, I know we've targeted people that normally wouldn't listen or be hearing the voter conversation. Let's make sure they're registered to vote. If we bump registrations up, primary turnout will be big, and then the general will be big, right? So I think it'll have like kind of a residual impact. So we're going to get out the vote this summer, man,
Awesome.
and I hope you can help.
That's always a good thing. You know, the more people we get involved, the better.
Somebody told me I won't say who. As long as we get the right people.
That's always the way it is.
It's like,
right?
I don't think you should say that out loud. You're not supposed to say that out loud.
Yes. Sometimes if we only had a king, right, then it would be all done how we wanted it. Yeah.
Yeah. Leviathan.
Yeah.
So what did you got into the politics. What was the first thing you felt like, oh, I need to learn this?
Yeah.
Like when you got down in the seat back then, because you were younger.
Yep.
You know, probably
so not
as experienced, right?
Yeah.
Just for the world.
Oh man, I have learned so much. I honestly didn't know what I was doing. And that's okay, you know. It's okay to not know everything when you get involved in this. And so I'd encourage anybody that wants to go ahead and get involved. And you know, that's what I did. Yeah. This started way back even before that. When growing up here in St. George, this is kind of the catalyst. Is there was a decision being made by the city council across the street from where I grew up in a residential area.
500 and 500.
Yep. The Children's Justice Center. It's been a great program. It's a great addition to our community. But at the time, it was coming into our residential neighborhood, which was a concern, right? What are we doing here? Plus the work they do, which is super important with, you know, children that are being abused. You know, there was some fear in the neighborhood about what element they were bringing into the neighborhood. Not realizing, I think at the time we weren't realizing as a neighborhood that this was for the children and you know, to do interviews with the children. We weren't bringing these child predators into the neighborhood. That's not the purpose of the Children's Justice Center. But I actually, as a high school, I was in high school at the time, and some of the neighbors asked me to give a speech at the city council, right? And so then you see all these people setting up.
Why did they come to you?
I don't know, just because they, you know.
Hey, get Jimmy to do it. He'll do anything.
Yeah, here's a young kid. You know, maybe they'll listen to him, right? It's different.
Did you do student body president? Were you a student body? Nothing.
Nope.
It's like, hey,
nothing.
Jimmy's silly enough.
He'll do it. And we lived directly across the street.
Yeah, important voice.
Yeah, so that was kind of the dynamics. Well, that same dais that's there now, there was those 5 people sitting up there and the mayor, and I give the speech and everybody else did their thing, and then it was just like, okay, thank you for all your comments, and so we're done. And this is what we're doing. We're voting for it. It felt like there was no listening at that point.
Deliberation.
So that stuck in my mind a long time. Then by way of California, Salt Lake, and then back home, I'm married, have children now, and we're back home. And one day I'm complaining. I don't even honestly remember what this decision was I was complaining about. And my wife says to me right in front of my children, well, if you're going to complain about it, go do something about it. Yeah. So I said, all right. And it just happened to be time to sign up for city council. I took my 2 boys, my 2 oldest boys, and I said, come on, I'll show you how this works. And so we went up to the city hall, we paid our $50 and signed up to run for city council. Yeah. Just like that. No pre-thought, no plan, no, hey, this is really what I want to do. Yeah. At the same time, I was actually changing careers from the real estate side to the mortuary side at the same exact year. This was 2011.
Trying to learn a bunch of stuff all at once.
Yeah. So I ran that first time and I lost by 100 votes. And so that was worth that was on that cycle where there was 2 council people being elected. I lost by 2 votes and I really didn't know what I was doing. Self-funded, didn't raise a lot of money. I got enough votes that a few people said, hey, you know, you need to do this, you need to do that, run again. So I did. I got my feet under me, got a little better prepared the next time, and I won by 100 votes. So, and here we are. Yeah. So, and I've been involved ever since. Like I say, I grew up here on 500 and 500, and this is my home, and it's become a passion for me to say, you know, this is St. George. What can I do to help it stay St. George? and still get it into the future.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if going back to the question, just kind of back to it. What was the first thing you wanted to learn though? Like when you got in there, you're in the position. Like, what was this like? Oh shoot, I need to really educate myself on this thing. Like, what was that one that stuck out in your mind? Like, I don't know anything about this. I need to go learn.
Well, so there's two things. The first thing is you hear all these stories about how there's certain people in charge and they're going to do this and they're going to make sure that you are in line and doing,
the good old boys
the company
club.
line. Yeah. That's the first thing. So I need to learn, who are those people I can trust and who are they not? That's the first thing you think of. Mm-hmm. The second thing,
unfortunately, worst part about politics, by the way. Which is why I'd never make it.
So you're looking for that. And then the second part was, at that time, the big issue was the ambulance at the time. We had Dixie Ambulance at the time, and there was a push to bring in the current ambulance company, which is Gold Cross. Okay. So we had a privately owned, you have two privately owned companies. One's a local company, one wasn't. So there was a lot of stuff going on like that. So I needed to get my feet on the ground as what's really going on here. Because you hear one thing and then you maybe learn another. So those are the two things that were going on at the time. Going
back to like the children's center, what I've noticed from going to city council meetings, like in Ivans, the Sitla property, the development of the Sitla property, I don't know if you followed that at all. It's just north of Black Desert.
Sure.
And, there was a proposal set before it, and then there was public comments on it, right? So I went and I had to hear people.
Yeah.
There's a guy who stood up. The first thing out of his mouth is, "You're trying to kill us all."
Right.
That's legitimately came out of his mouth, and I'm like, this has no. There's no way somebody would die from any of the things they're doing that day, right?
Sure.
Developing that piece of property is not going to, it's going to impact the community.
Yeah.
Mayor Hart he had commented on it, but one of the city council members, and I'm drawing a blank on who it was, said in that meeting, which I thought was resonated with me, it was really impactful, was once we build on it, that's what we get.
Yeah.
Like once there's a building on it, there's not a whole lot of going back from that, right? So like going from the land to a building, it's important. It's an important first step.
Sure.
Right? And so I can see where the passion comes from with that. Mm-hmm. But what I found out most was that when developers pitch it to the city council, they pitch it one way.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
And then they normally never pitch it to the public. And so something gets leaked, one thing gets said, just one tiny thing gets spun out of control. And then you get all this flood of people. And then the city council actually delays progressing the development because it's actually the town that doesn't have perspective. The city council has clarity, which is what we want them to do. Sure. Right? We want them to, progress in a healthy way.
Sure.
Because progress is built into the system. It's either slow progress or a little faster progress, but progress nonetheless, right?
Yeah. You don't want to go the other way.
Yeah, you can't go back.
No,
we can't go back.
No.
Or we're dying, which you get cities
not
in
healthy.
Italy, right?
Yes.
It's not healthy,
no,
right?
We don't want that.
And so, and nobody wants that. So going back to it, I feel like the developers do a poor job explaining to the public. So I'm curious, how do we bridge that gap, right? How do we kind of communicate better as communities goes? And that goes back to Facebook and, what are some of the social platforms that we could all live on that makes communication easy, and Twitter would be my choice. Like if I was a politician, I'd go to Twitter and say, hey, this is a free market. Yeah. Speak your mind.
Yep.
There's no rules. And then it's a direct, right? Jimmie can put exactly his thoughts on the closing public comment last week.
Yep.
I got to ask you about that, right? So, and maybe that's the transition, but I think the city council should have a direct digital platform to its constituents. Sure. And we don't really have that here. It's like we're backwards a little bit in St. George.
Yeah, let me just address a few of those things because I think you're really onto something. And one it's the word I'm thinking of is transparency, because when we have that person, like you were saying in Ivans, that steps up there and says that out of frustration, there's a lack of that person has not understood the full details of what's happening.
And the emotion's valid too. Sure. His fear was a real thing, right? Yeah. He sound like he was pretending.
Sure.
And so if I'm a city council member and I was hearing him say that, I would have an emotional, I'm like, that guy is serious about this. He's not just a crazy guy, right?
And the question then is why? Why is he doing that?
Why is he like that?
And a lot of it's because maybe they haven't heard the full story or they've gotten some misinformation. And so then, and we've talked about this even at the city is, so how do we be more transparent and get that information out to people? And we kind of talked about this a little bit at the first is where do people get their information anymore? It used to be you got the newspaper every day.
Spectrum, you got an op-ed and everybody was reading the newspaper, but it was direct local communication.
Yeah, so if you wanted to get the word out, you put it in the newspaper
that
and
was
everybody
the media
reads
source.
it. And
Pulitzer
then,
and Hearst.
Yeah, then I remember even as growing up, my parents at 10 o'clock, the local news comes on, right? The news comes out of Salt Lake here in St. George, but the news comes on, you watch the news, you get the weather. Every day you kind of have an idea what's going on. And if somebody needed to get the word out, you could get it out that way. What do we do today?
Dude, it's chaos.
And that's where what
chaos.
you're doing is super important because, where do you get your news? You know where I get mine? Facebook.
Yeah.
And is that the most reliable source?
You're like, I know it's not.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm ashamed.
Yeah.
It's almost like I'm ashamed to tell you that's where I go for my news.
That algorithm is telling me maybe what I want to hear, and I'm only going to get information to what they want me to see unless I go looking for it. So we do have a real void in that. So in that area, in this area.
That's why I'm a promoter of Twitter. I'm definitely a promoter of Twitter.
And you're funny that you say that because I was just reading some of what's going on with Twitter, and I was thinking, you know what?
Tucker Carlson went. That was just this week.
I'm going to have to break down and get on Twitter because I think that is where a lot of this is going because there's a platform that you can do whatever you need to do, and nobody's trying to guide that, at least for now.
I think Trump showed that he could deliver the message he was wanting. You could tell the way he wrote, the caps, right? You could hear him talking, right? You could just hear it in his tweets. And that's something that going back in time, Abraham Lincoln, the Gettysburg Address, right? He had to go to do these speeches and then they would get written down. There's barely a picture of him. And that was less than, that was probably 280 characters, right? That's like the Gettysburg Address is essentially a tweet. And
it's true.
That went like a rapid fire across the whole entire country. And at the same time, we have this at the tip of our fingers, but the city governments, there's some resistance, right? Because of certain age, but the millennial generation is among us right now. I had to realize I'm an adult now. I'm like one of the oldest millennials, right? I was born in 87. And I was like, I don't know how I'm a millennial, but I'm between Gen X and I guess it would be Y, is I think Y after millennial. And that point is, hey, we have to get on a digital place, right? The world survives majority in physical world, and then we have this digital platform that we all live on. And the percentage portion is going to change over time. But anyway, your support in getting everybody on one platform would be so great.
No,
it'd be so great.
I think we got to do that because there is a void there, and we're always struggling. Like I say, at the city level, how do we get the information out? And nobody has a good answer to that where it is. And we try, we try to have Facebook, Instagram.
So maybe take a second. Everybody, I took a photo of it. I'm like, somebody's mad. Look, I didn't turn off my phone because I needed the questionnaire, and now it's ringing. Hey, it's a lead.
Oh no,
it doesn't matter. I was like, the mayor canceled public comment. I was sitting next to the Bozeman's. Right? Legends of Sun River.
Always at City Council.
And just met him for the first time. I heard about him. I was like, I got to go meet them. So I walked. That was the first person I sat next to, and we just started talking. And she's like, I don't know why everybody's here. She's like, I think it's because they canceled public comment. And lo and behold, the signs go up. And my post immediately was like, what? Everybody has this reaction. And I'm like, wait a minute. What's the story?
Sure.
Can you clarify what happened?
Yeah, sure. So Mayor Pike instituted the open public comment the first of every month.
Great idea, by the way.
Yeah, and it's a great idea. And
how many years ago would have that been? 7?
I'm saying, it's got to be 7 or 8. And at some point in the past, there was some thought when Mayor Randall took over to counsel it. And at that time, it was because we were getting very few people that would come and take advantage of it.
Let's clarify too. You get 3 minutes to talk at the beginning of the first city council meeting of the month.
Yep.
And you get 3 minutes.
St. George residents.
St. George residents, and on a topic, something that's important
besides what's on the agenda.
Yeah, something that's important.
Or what's likely to be on the agenda the next meeting. So we're trying to be fair to the people that want to speak on both sides of an issue that's coming before the council.
Give it some extra record time,
right? But
that you don't keep, but that's fine.
Yeah, but the reality is, we want to make sure that people have a chance to come and address the entire council. You can call us, you can email us, you can do all that. But here's a time when you can come in front of the public and in front of the whole council and address them and say, hey, this is an issue. And it's effective for some. We weren't getting a lot of that, or we might have been getting one or two people that were coming all the time that were saying the same things, right? And so it was like, okay. But in a way, when the thought was to council, was like, you know what? I don't mind dealing with a little inconvenience just to keep that open for people so they know they can come and address us if they need. Then we've entered into a different era where we have some other issues going on. I don't know how much you want to talk about those, but
all of them.
Yeah. So we've been having basically two sides of the, hey, when the drag show came, been having two sides of this issue, which is a social issue and a national issue.
A blazing ball of fire.
Right. Which we have
that conversation.
We have very little effect on that decision as far as how it looks nationwide. Now, we are responsible for what our community stands for and what we call quote unquote community standards, which are another topic about, what are community standards and how do those hold up in court and yada, yada. But the fact of the matter is we basically
luckily we have the Constitution and we can just go right back to the Constitution. It's pretty clear.
Wouldn't it be nice if we could just do that?
We can.
And then not have to have people arguing about it over and over.
The rabble, the mob,
yes,
right? And that's a political ideology issue. Like no matter what we're talking, whether we're a democracy or authoritarianism or whatever it is,
I agree with
there's
that.
always going to be the mob,
Yep.
the chaotic, just rabble,
which we've avoided in this country. And
we've avoided it in St. George because it was a small town for so long. You're like, well, we don't really have like a missing middle. There's not a mob out there at the moment.
Yeah.
And now as you crest over 200,000 people in a small space, you start to get that.
Yeah. But democracy is not mob rule, so we have to keep that in mind.
Not mob rule.
So
it's a republic.
So we got two sides of the issue now, and so that has happened is that's taken the meeting over as that first meeting now has become a pulpit, to get our message out.
Yeah.
So we've heard the message. We understand the dynamics. We know there's some things that certain members of the public want and some don't, and there's going to be some division on that, and there's going to be some discussion, and there has been discussion. So then the thought was, when the mayor came to each of the council members, and I'm assuming she talked to all the council members.
She said that at the very beginning,
yes.
So she's on the record to say she had the support of everyone.
Okay, there is a difference between having a conversation with and having support.
Yep.
Okay?
Agreed.
And that's be very clear on that. So my answer to that question was, yeah, this has kind of turned into, we'll go 2 hours with that comment period and accomplish absolutely nothing because we've heard the argument before. So my comment was, we need to find a way that we can allow this public comment to continue without having the same discussions every time because it's not productive. So can we limit it to you can come and speak once every 3 months, or you can come and speak on a different topic? Let's keep it to topics we didn't discuss last month. If we've already discussed the topic, I didn't know what all the ramifications of that were.
Yep.
But that's my thought, right? That was my answer to the mayor. This is what I hope we can do. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then she said, well, I think I want to just suspend it for a while and, we'll see what happens and maybe do written comment. Mm-hmm. My words exactly. They're not going to be happy. And, but she's the mayor, right?
She's the mayor. She's the executive.
So 2 years, well, it hasn't been 2 years, but a year ago, I ran for the mayor's position. Right. I lost. I'm not a sore loser. That's her prerogative.
I'm a horrible loser.
She runs the. Yeah, I'm a horrible loser, not a sore loser. She runs the meeting how she sees fit, and that's her call. Immediately before the meeting, there was some concern from a couple of council members. Yeah. Wait, are we voting on this? No, we're not voting on this. This is just a decision I made. Okay, so we're just counseling it. I'm going to make a statement. And then everybody walked into that room knowing there was probably a bomb that was getting ready to go off.
Yeah. Well, I want to allow the mayor to, before I reveal, I guess I did a pretty good job on my own social media of just saying how I felt about it. I think there was mistakes on all parts.
100%.
Could have been handled differently.
100%.
And at the same time, it's a moving target for a mayor. I can't imagine the job's it's got to be so tough. You know what I mean? And doing the city council job in one of the fastest growing cities in the entire nation that has limited resources, that's we've become a vacation town, not a city like a typical metro is.
Sure.
We got a lot of complex things that we're dealing with, a lot of moving targets. So progress for progress's sake is definitely, have to be considered.
Yeah.
And so slow and steady wins the race in some ways. And then there's times where if we don't act quickly on other things, these can have massive residual impacts, right?
I agree. Yeah. So there's a lot of complexities there, but the real point is we need to...
That was helpful. I appreciate your clarity on that.
We need to try to work together is the problem. And so there's been a little bit of a learning curve since the last election of how we can get everybody to try to work together, but still promote their own ideas and stand their ground on things they feel important.
I'll give you just this one thought on the public comment piece. Go ahead. So you get public comment. It was a luxury. Mm-hmm. City council meetings are due process meetings.
Yeah, sure.
So in operating any business, there's certain standards that must be in place. If I'm going to run a restaurant, I need to be wearing gloves and a hairnet or there's health code standards that I'm not immune from, and the public can't interact and disrupt those due process things, right? Exactly. It shouldn't be, that's not the forum for it. Right. There's another venue for you to speak your mind somewhere else. And it used to be the street with a picket sign or a bullhorn. You could get out, get a permit, there's due process abilities for you to speak your mind. Sure. Social media, you can say all the stuff that you want and direct message and email and phone call, or I got a hold of you. It wasn't that difficult to get a hold of you, right?
It's not.
And set a meeting. Yeah. If you want to tell your elected officials, we're right here. We go to the same grocery stores together. Yeah. You know what I mean? We pass each other on the streets. So
this is all part of the thought process that, I'm sure the mayor went through and we've all been going through.
Yeah. So as a people, everybody settle down. If you have an issue though, have constructive, let's have a constructive dialogue in those meetings, and not just saying, hey, I'm upset and I want people to hear me throw my temper tantrum, Yep. So I'm all for, if it's not a productive, 30 minutes to an hour, then I can see how we're like, hey, we got a lot more fish to fry.
Sure.
So as progress has been made, back to the first question, what are the really important issues from your stance right now?
So, water is a whole nother subject. So we know water is an issue. This year, not so much. It was
my last question on my questionnaire.
Yeah, so this year, not so much. It's kind of, we're all, yay,
It's forever going to be a problem. Yeah. It was a problem in 1868 when we...
part of our existence here.
Exactly.
Yeah. Really what we're looking at really hard right now is our transportation routes.
Okay.
I mean, traffic's starting to get worse, especially for us old timers that have been here for a while. I mean, this is, taking me, 20 minutes to get from where I was today to here is just, I can't stand that, right? So, so transportation, making sure we have adequate transportation routes is kind of a big one right now. As long as we can forget about these social issues, that's taking up a lot of our time that we want to try to get away from. Our aging infrastructure, as far as water lines, sewer lines, some of those things. Yep, and roads. What do we have? 400 and some odd 50 miles of public roads right in St. George that we have to maintain. That's a long ways. That's way past Salt Lake, right? That we have to maintain. I don't know how many, almost 900 miles of water line, a little over 500 miles of sewer line. All those things are aging, and we have to keep on top of those. So those are things that are really on our mind right now as we try to grow into the future and build the new infrastructure. Let's not forget about what we have to maintain. So I think those are two of the big things.
So transportation and then public works, utilities, things like that.
Yep.
I've talked with a couple of the city council members and a few of the mayors specifically about energy and power. How that's still going to be a running conversation, and we have some hurdles.
Yes, and something a little different about St. George. A lot of cities don't have their own power department. So we have St. George as part St. George Power, and then we also have Dixie Power. The part of St. George I live in is has Dixie Power, and then we have St. George Power. The nice thing about St. George Power is there's so much duplicity, if I could say it. We have the gas turbines over in Mill Creek.
Yep.
I don't know if you're familiar with those, that we can
Fire up at any time.
we can fire up
auxiliary
and run. We can actually run the city. Now, it might require us.
It's the equivalent of a generator
Yes.
at a hospital,
Yeah.
right? Like
Big
keeping
jet turbines that keep things going.
The essentials will keep rolling
Right.
if we don't have Pacific giving us juice.
Yeah,
essentially.
And then we have ways to route that power to certain parts of the city. We couldn't run the whole city at once, but we could run certain parts of the city and then switch it
Rotate
to other
it
part. And so you'd have like rolling blackouts if power were to stop completely.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have some.
And what would be the source of that? Because the way I don't understand energy infrastructure enough. I was told to talk to Lori Mangum about it, because she's like the wizard when it comes to our energy department.
A brilliant mind and super good at explaining it when you don't understand all those things.
Yeah.
She's simple. She's simple. She's retiring, by the way, in the next
That's what I heard. We got to get a good replacement. Well,
yeah.
So the thought would be, help me just maybe understand. You have Rocky Mountain Power that's also a subsidiary of Pacific.
Yeah, I don't know all the details of that, but Rocky Mountain doesn't come much further than Enterprise. Or Central.
But I pay Rocky Mountain in Ivans.
Oh, okay. All right.
So we have Rocky Mountain, we have St. George City, we have Dixie Power, and then what else? Is that it?
Yeah, that's the three that I'm aware of.
Okay, cool.
So, have you ever been up to the power department?
Mm-mm.
You should do a tour up there. Power. All of us are kind of competing for the same amounts of power. So St. George City actually buys and sells power
daily.
So they have a little room like this with computers, just like you might see at a stock exchange. And
hopefully she has a window.
They don't have a window. It's a room like this that does not have a window.
Yeah.
And the lights are always down, and they have the screens, and they have people that are there trading power on a daily basis, buying what we need into the future. It's so impressive. And so we have large chunks of power that we have purchased, whether it be hydro, which is from the dam, or whether it be
which dam?
Glen Canyon.
Canyon.
So Lake Powell, basically, which we've had some issues with the water being low there. That's a danger. We have a little bit of coal still, which is phasing out.
They're rolling them out. Which, in my opinion, it's something that needs to happen at certain ages of coal plants. Like they do legitimate harm,
right?
Like they do legitimate harm. There's cities in Kentucky. I don't know if you've seen on YouTube. They're like basically the downwinders. There's cities that are literally being covered in ash on a regular basis because of old coal power plants.
Right.
So when the EPA comes in and you get this pressure for coal to go away, they're talking about there's a couple of different versions, right? Energy's changed a lot over the last 2 decades.
Yeah. So there is some pretty good clean burning.
There's
coal
some
stuff
clean coal
so,
stuff, which is part of it.
Yeah. So in my mind, maybe we've forced that too much, and so we're kind of finding ourselves in a little bit of a bind as far as where we buy power. We have the solar, obviously that's become a bigger thing, and wind. And so we have, Lori's tried to do a good job of diversifying where we get our power. And she has contracts with some of these places many years into the future at certain rates. So we know what we're going to pay. This helps to protect the ratepayer from the volatility of saying, our rates are going to skyrocket this year.
Right.
There'll probably be a steady increase in power rates because of coal going away, but those are all factors that we take into consideration with the power, St. George Power. So there's a lot of complexity there, but we have some brilliant minds that are
What's your position on nuclear? I heard there's a plant up in Idaho. Yep. Hurricane is bought into it as a source.
Yep.
What's your opinion on it?
So UAMPS is what it's called. Is kind of one of those power conglomerates that find places for power companies to buy power, municipal power companies. And they have, and this is after talking with Lori, we have opted to say, wait and see, right? Because this is still very new technology. They're smaller size nuclear plants that are supposed to be...
They're like micro nuclear.
Yeah, they're supposed to be super safe. One of those things where, there would have to be a major, major issue for it to ever get out of hand. And they're underground, yada, yada. And the waste that comes from those is actually fairly minor when you consider the other sources of power that we get from solar panels that at some point are going to deteriorate and have to be disposed of, to the coal plants that we know have some pollution. So I think it's viable for the future. The question is, how soon do we want to get involved in investing in that technology, and how much will that cost the taxpayer if it does go wrong. And so we're happy to wait and see. And at some point, we'll probably look at saying, hey, if they get that up and running, we'll buy power from them. So, but what they were asking for is a pretty major investment up front. And we said, we're okay. You figure that out. And in my mind, the free market ought to be saying, hey, here's a way we can provide some reliable, clean power. If they do that, we're going to be there ready to buy it.
Yeah. So then let's talk about the free market on that. What's your position, infrastructure being a thing, transportation being a thing. At what point are we, because I think we approved for a bunch of buses to bus people to Zion.
Yep.
And 5 buses. How much did they cost?
You'll have to go back and look at it.
And it's reappropriated fund. It was state funds passed through St. George, right? Yep. It's like, hey, this has already been paid, because there was a little conversation about it. And this has been paid for by the state. We're approving it because the funds are already allotted. If we say no to them, something else happens to that money. We lose control of the money. And this is called pork barrel politics.
Exactly.
Is a perfect example of this, right?
Exactly. That's one of the things I dislike, but here's this money. It can only be spent for this.
Appropriated for this.
Yep. And you cannot have it if you don't spend it for this. And so that's what that
blackmail.
Pretty much. I mean, you can say it that way. That's your typical pork belly spending, or this is appropriated funding. This is where it goes. It's for this project. Now,
is it something we needed?
That remains to be seen. So this, if you were to talk to the folks in Springdale, around Zion, they would say, yes, we need this, because they're dealing with parking issues up there. And so they're wanting people to take the bus more. If you might talk to Hurricane, and they would say, this is going to give us some connectivity, because that bus is going to go through Hurricane and all the way to St. George. So then there's people can actually get on a bus in Hurricane and come to St. George. Will people use that? That remains to be seen. And this is why we're into this. This has been being talked about probably for 5 years now. And St. George is like, oh, this is great. If you want to do that, we're okay with that. We didn't ever want to get involved in that. In fact, we resisted that. Well, we already have Suntran. So at this point, then as I talked to Cameron, I said, the only way we ever get involved in that with Suntran is if it benefits Suntran as a whole. And that's where then the funding comes down, that we can put in some infrastructure that we'll use at Suntran, which is not a moneymaker. It's also heavily subsidized. Suntran, our local bus system, it does not make money and may never.
It will never.
Yeah. And I don't know of one that does.
It doesn't have the incentive to make money because it knows that the government has its back. If push comes to shove, they'll take a loss on it.
Yep.
And it's called a loss leader in business.
Yep.
Some businesses don't make money. Some franchises, right? You'll this Walmart will make money and then this one won't, right?
So the question is, will it alleviate traffic, or is it providing a service that you're really willing to subsidize? That's the fact of the matter, and we should never.
You voted yes.
Fact. Yes, you should never hide from that. So the money's there. This is the Suntran system is actually
who got us the money.
Okay, so that's UDOT.
Okay, UDOT got it
through UDOT. There is
who voted on that.
There's a transportation board here in the county. It's made up of all the cities in the county.
Okay. To
make sure we have interconnectivity between cities. So Mayor Hart from Ivins chairs that board. I sit on that board. Danielle Larkin, the mayor. That's the 3 of us from St. George. And so we talk about
how big is the board? Quorum of the 12.
There's probably at least 12 members. So every city has a member. The bigger cities have more than one. Like St. George, we have the 3 voting members.
Equal representation based on population.
The idea is there's a lot of federal and state money that comes down for transportation. How do we best spend that to make sure our transportation system connects between the cities? It's not just about St. George. It's about how do we get up and down I-15, and how do we connect with Washington, like the George Washington Parkway. There was some collaboration there. And then the Southern Corridor. All those things are discussed in that board. And there's a 50-year plan that we have out there. And then we modify it as things change. So that's where the idea was first hatched. The county's been a very big proponent of pushing this.
So that was started 5 years ago, and we're getting to
I'm going to say at least 5 years ago. As far as when the money came out, our original plan was, let's put this out there to like St. George Shuttle and some of them, and see if the private
sector wanted to pick it up,
can pick it up and make it work.
Not a chance.
No, not at the rates, and to increase the ridership to what it needs to be. So
I can't imagine these buses are going to have 10 people on it.
Right.
Why?
Again, I'm not going to vouch for it.
I'm trying to think. All the people that have ever visited me in St. George over the last, because I've been here since 2015. I'm a new guy from California. I'm like the thing that the locals are like, oh my gosh, this kid. Yeah. He's not even from here. What is he doing? Right? Like I'm that guy. But I'm also, I feel like at a certain point I had perspective.
Sure.
You know? And so I'm looking at us going down, and the people that visit me, they want to go with me. And if the bus doesn't allow it, because once you get into Springdale, then, you know, there's some bus system that can go around, or people will hike around. But really the car is still kind of the best way to get around. It's a little windy. Yeah. There's not like a little walking street, right? It's kind of a long road. Yeah. So the design of the town in general is for a car, which makes sense. Yeah. But at the same time, I just can't imagine if we were to all go up there, you'd almost feel trapped. It's not far enough away to where you're like, I'm going to ride it up there and spend the night.
Right.
The idea of riding that thing back after being a day up in Zion does not sound like something I'd want to do.
No, I'm not going to ride it either. And so that remains to be seen. So that's a legitimate question to say, hey, what, you know,
now that we have them, can we sell them and then do something different?
Yeah. So it's guaranteed to be funded for so many, I think it's 10 years or 15 years. I'll have to look at that. At that end of that, there's no guarantees. So that money could be, you're legitimate in saying that money could be completely wasted at that point. Will anybody ride it? That remains to be seen. We just had, a part of that discussion is we just had the transportation commissioner in Cache Valley come down and speak to us in that board. And they've moved to a no cost transportation system. I can't remember what the word is for it now. It's not free. It's not a free ride. It's zero fare. That's what they call it. Zero fare.
Euphemism.
Yeah. So because free ride is a misnomer because it's not free. Someone's paying for it.
Right.
Someone's paying for it. You or I or someone, you know, federal taxpayers are paying for it because it's subsidized. But the way they get the usage that has the impact that they want, which is to reduce traffic, is it has to be zero fare. So that's something in the back of our minds too.
We won't use it if we don't pay for it. If we have to pay for it, we won't use it.
Right.
That's the idea.
And so, that's the idea. So will people ride it if it's zero fare? And then how do you pay for that? And then it's just an endless cycle of, you know, it's going to have to be subsidized. So is the benefit of that subsidy, is it worth it? Is it really going to reduce the traffic to where it has an impact? And I don't know the answer to that. But the question then is, if the money's there, and at the end of the day, if that all goes away, our SunTran infrastructure is going to be better because of it. That's when I switched the corner and said, okay, when I talked to Cameron Cutler, our public works guy, he said, this will benefit us in the long run, even if it goes away, because of the money that we will get for running the system will improve our infrastructure, our SunTran infrastructure. At the end of the day, we win.
Yeah.
So even if it goes away, we win, but it's going to cost. There's a cost to it. There's no free.
There's a cost to it, right? Yeah. So then going back to the free market, like where do we start to draw the line at the city level with how we allow the gatekeepers to come and go? Because, you know, at a certain point, we've lost sight, in my opinion, of a bottom up governmental structure where the districts and the representatives, the delegates, right, the electoral college are the ones that are kind of leading the charge as developments go. Because the only thing I would say is this is when I'm going to use Springdale as the example. In 2015, which May 5th, we moved here, 2015, we went up to Zion National Park on Christmas Day. We saw 2 people. I drove all the way to the end, Riverside Walk, saw 2 cars.
Used to be Zion. The best time to go.
On Christmas Day. Yeah. We have thousands and thousands of people that are coming Christmas Day to Zion National Park. Yeah. That was 2015. In less than, it was the third Christmas they started trams. That was 3 years. Yeah. But we made a policy on transportation 5 years ago, and we still haven't even seen the bus yet. And our entire world has exploded in that 5-year time. Yeah. So we made decisions with the information that we had, because we're only as good as the information that we have at the time. Right. Is it possible that moving forward, we start to look at St. George, we got it almost where we change our we have to almost look further down the future and say, what at the current race of technology, at the current pace, if something's going to be a loss leader, what's the best possible loss leader on public transportation that we could do right now, that 5 years from now we look back and we're like, holy crap, it's like the reservoirs, the brilliance that our heritage did in prepping for water. They missed the boat on the transportation side.
Right.
And we had a lot of geographic dynamics that come into play. But does that thought maybe help me?
No, I see what you're saying. And so that's the tough question because on the other side of that spectrum, there are people and members of that board who would like to see us force people maybe to ride public transportation or ride the bus by not building as many roads. So part of what you're saying is, that forethought does not say only plan for buses. Let's keep building the roads because, like I think I heard you say, I'm going to keep driving my car. You know? Yeah,
like if you go to Thailand,
that's American to me.
If you go to Bangkok, guess what people ride? Scooters.
Yeah,
they're like, it's tight. Then they eliminate lanes. Yeah, right. Like it doesn't just be like, then they'll ride public transportation. No, they're still going to get around as fast as they can.
Right.
With whatever alleyways they have, because we're like ants, right? We're all just like falling into our trails or the rabbit trails or whatever. So, less roads, that's not going to help.
Sure. And I
feel like there's a very obvious answer and I haven't heard it said.
Okay. Build more roads?
Subway.
Yeah. Oh, well, now you're talking huge money.
Think if we had 500,000 people in Washington County from Hurricane to St. George, but we had a 21st century subway system.
Yeah.
On electric tracks.
Sure. Yeah.
And maybe not electric because we have an energy problem, right? We come up with something, but we have so many ups and downs. The gravity, I bet you gravity track, because Ivans is so much higher than St. George. Anything moving from Ivans to St. George would just move on its own. It wouldn't even need very much energy to go. We have sandstone. There's tunnels. The Washington, in Middleton, have you heard about the caves that are back in there?
Yeah.
You've seen that? Yeah. You know how fast he can go?
How?
He can dig into that sand tunnel. He could do, I think he told me 25 square feet in 10 minutes.
Wow. But then you still have people like me that we're just always going to drive our car.
I know. So, have you been to New York?
Yeah.
Did you ride the subway?
In New York, I did.
You did?
And I just barely came back from Washington, D.C. The same thing. Rode it there as well.
Was it?
The Metro.
It was actually...
No, it's good.
The way it's set up, right? And actually, if you just
there, I would hate to drive. I would hate to drive.
Had you even considered Subway?
No, absolutely no.
Thinking about it now, though, I'm curious. Like maybe if you let that marinate for a minute and look at because I think of if we were to dig a tunnel between Green Springs and Red Hills Parkway instead of going over.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it would eliminate everybody's worries.
That reminds me of Mayor McCarthy used to always talk about, digging a tunnel under the old airport hill so you could get to Green Valley a lot easier.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's weird. And then it's like, well, that wouldn't be so bad. Like, think how
wasn't the I-15 a tunnel before?
The I-15? No, they always had the cut there, didn't they?
I don't know.
Yeah. They always had it. It was a cut. Yeah.
But I think of Kolob, right? And like that tunnel and
tunnel in Zion.
Exactly. So thinking about that a little deeper, I think there might be some solutions. I pitched this to Danielle. I was like, electric track along the trail system, right? Little pods like going everywhere. But I'm like, what's legitimate? What's because if it's going to be a loss leader, a transportation loss leader, what's the best possible one we could do?
And that's an interesting thought. Would that be better than, buses? And I don't know that.
Because if I could jump on a little subway, because you have little pop-up chutes all over that don't require a lot of infrastructure. It's like a little hut with stairs.
Yeah.
And if I was in Ivans, I'd ride the subway into St. George every day.
Well, even in DC, between the House and the Senate chambers, there's little trains underneath where you can jump on, little like a golf cart and trains, and you just
And I think
that makes sense.
If you take the 21st century of doing stuff digitally but where the people come here because they want to go outside and they want to go to all the different aspects.
Sure.
We have, this might be an interesting segue and a little bit of a stretch because I don't want to beat up transportation too much. But Danielle told me that as far as the city council is represented, the only corner of the county or the city that's represented is like basically Little Valley. Everybody is from like that area. All the city council members are from that area.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've seen as like?
Well, she lives downtown now, so that area.
She lives downtown, but it's like there's no West Siders. You don't have anybody represented on the West Side in St. George.
Gail Bunker, she was on the West Side.
Is that even a thing? Because I joke because I'm like the West Side's the best side because I love Red Mountain and that.
It's a thing from the standpoint that we have to be careful not to forget about this end of town. You know, the west end of town. So that's important because you could get, you know, just wrapped up in your own area. And a lot of the major growth is happening down in that Little Valley area. So a lot of our time spent there, as far as our thinking time and our working time at city council. So there's a real danger of that happening. And so from that standpoint, we got to be cognizant and pay attention.
If you need to let me help you move. Now that the kids are out downsize, I'll help you find a house on the West Side you'll love.
Yeah. And so just by nature of the elections, I'm assuming there's been people, I'm trying to think of people that have ran in the past that have been from this side. So, and there's been talk of districting in St. George but that brings up a whole nother ball of wax. And
when she said that, I was like, that's kind of a weird thing, but I don't know if we're big enough to where we're like, man, there's some real social differences in parts of town. I don't know, or opinions, right? I don't know.
But we ought to be good enough that we can represent the entire city and be aware of the issues that are over on the west side and not forget about them. I mean, we should be able to do that. So I spend a lot of time over on that side of town just because by nature of the boards I sit on, the switch points over on that end of town.
Oh, so by the way, we got to cover switch point.
Yeah.
This is a good opportunity.
St. George Housing Authority. I was just at a meeting. Was that yesterday? Yeah, yesterday for St. George Housing Authority. So I try to, you know, think of the city as a whole, but you could, you know, find yourself focusing on your own neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So, of course, that's the people you see most often, and they're people that are going to be knocking on your door. So, but I would hope that people on the west side would feel okay about talking to somebody that lives on the other end of town and saying, "Hey, stick up for us." We're working with some issues with some playground equipment over on the west side that, you know, they felt like a little bit that they were forgotten, and I don't blame them because that project did get forgotten as far as there was some discrepancy on, you know, who was in charge of that playground.
Is it Cottonwood?
No.
Panorama?
Yeah. No, that's on the other side.
Oh, yeah.
But the issue was that it's a shared park between the school district and the city. And so basically they fix it. No, they fix it. And nobody got together and said who fixes it. And so, you know, so the PTA president got involved and was like, "Hey, what the heck's going on?" And good for her, you know? And then we find out about it and go, "Yeah, what is going on?" And it gets fixed. Yeah. Because, you know, this is a part-time gig, so we all got careers. And so, you know, unless somebody brings that up, and that's what's so important, unless people get involved and bring some of those things up, we may miss it. You know, we may miss it. We're right there with you in the trenches, making a living for our families and, you know, paying taxes and doing all those things and trying to enjoy life and making our community a better place. And so we want you to give some input. So, but as we're talking about, and we're talking about districting, that, you know, that's something that as we grow, there's going to be some more discussion on that. I'm assuming that full-time mayor, do we move to the next step, which is a 7-member council? You know, how does that all play out? So there's a lot of things like that.
Is that conversation going at the moment?
It's really been kind of going for the last couple of years, as far as, you know, but nobody wants to bring that up, and that's probably
what's the benchmark? Is there, you know, looking at other cities' growth patterns?
Population is one of them, as far as and we're probably getting to that point. And then the other thing is just what the community desires. There's no requirement that we would have to ever go to a full-time mayor.
I think we should cut all of the funding for all of the city, everything. Just kidding.
Yeah.
That's a Ron Swanson. That's the Parks and Rec Ron Swanson.
Yeah. So
unfunctional government.
Yeah. And there's people that feel that as any money that we spend.
I have I'm a libertarian, so like I really do believe like as small a government as possible.
Right. Yeah,
is important,
and that's my background, and I feel like that. And so then, and you asked earlier, where do you draw the line? And I think that's something that's been being argued since the founding of our country, and saying, hey, we want to be as free as possible and as small as government as possible. And that argument started immediately. Yep. Okay, what does that mean? How small? You know, the Constitutional Convention, they were hammering that stuff out as how strong is the central government, and that argument started then, and it's still going. Where does that pendulum swing? And
Well,
you know?
the Fed's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, right? States' rights got smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
And it was the truth of it, I think the states' rights conversation at the beginning has played out exactly as the worries were.
Mm-hmm.
However, it just took a whole lot longer, right? And it's taken so many different forms. We've had lots of different, chaotic, apocalyptic type events that have happened, World War I and II, and you have, the stock market crashes and
people's desire
world
for
economies.
Yeah, people's desire for safety and, comfort, they're willing to give that up. I personally am not. I'm all on board. We get those rights back to the state as much as we can. And then from there, how do they trickle down to us in the county and the city so that our best government is at the local level? That's where we want it. That's where city council, that's where the rubber meets the road. We're making decisions on things that affect you every day. Yeah. So I know you might have said this just maybe not necessarily as thoughtfully as you might look back at saying it, but you said it's a part-time job. Yeah.
But at a certain level, it's like a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job, right?
I spend way more than part-time.
Yeah.
I spend way more than part-time.
So in our minds, we think, okay, the governmental structure should be moving down a road at its own pace, because we have professionals, we have public administrators that do this thing, and we got to trust that they're doing a good job at certain levels, and we're gatekeepers. Yeah. And so it shouldn't necessarily be a full-time job. It should be something that you can also do in conjunction with other things, because if it's not that way, then we've become the Goliath that we don't want, right?
That's where it's so crucial that we have the employees that are top-notch.
Best. So we need the absolute best.
The top-notch. And we get a lot of flack sometimes for, why do you pay this person that? And why do you pay that person that?
I saw that one time, and the argument doesn't hold water. It's like saying a nonprofit organization pays their CEOs $250,000. Well, if you don't have a really good talented person, they'll take their talents to Cleveland.
You said
right?
it. You said it.
It's like LeBron.
Yep. You said it.
He's going to the paycheck. That's the way the free market works.
We have to be competitive in the employment market,
exactly,
or we are not going to have the best of the best.
Exactly.
From everything from our janitors to right up to our police officers. We have to be on that, and that's a tough job sometimes, because it costs a lot of money, and that market changes, and we have to be on top of that. So, and that's why we have to have people in human resources, a city manager. Or you could hire a bunch of full-time politicians. Like if we were to go to a full-time mayor, you're hiring or you're voting on someone that their first priority is their job. Then are you really going to get what you want out of that person? So I'm torn on that one. I'm not in favor of a full-time mayor, because I can tell you someone like me wouldn't want to do it. I have other career aspirations, right? So I want to do other things.
A full-time mayor means that our government's gotten too big.
Well,
that we've gotten too big to where decision making isn't allowed by the market, by the private.
The argument is then they're then accountable to the people for those decisions, not the city manager. Well, the city manager answers to the city council. He answers or she answers to us. Mm-hmm. And so if that city manager is running the city in a form that's not agreeable to the public,
that's
all you have to do is
relay.
Get rid of us, and that changes, right?
Exactly, and that's why the executive is the mayor is one, and then legislative is the is the council, and then you have judges and things like that outside those systems. But
right before I got on the council, we had and I had the privilege of serving with a city manager that served for 35 plus years.
Crazy,
and since then we've changed. We've had another change. So.
Hasn't gone well recently, but that's all right. That was a little bumpy road.
We have an excellent city manager.
John's a great guy.
If you have not had the chance to meet John Willis, you need to do that. This guy gets it. He's come up through the ranks. He understands St. George. He grew up here.
Help me get him on the podcast. I want to have him on the podcast.
John is awesome. That was let me just say, it was a great move. That was a great move.
Okay.
If I don't get reelected, which is probably not a possibility, I would. I'll be glad that I was part of getting John in that job.
In the role,
I'll be glad in that role.
Well, and so it's a tough job. Mm-hmm. And so looking down the road, what projects? I'm going to come right back to it. What projects? Like what are we up against that you need to be there for? Like what are the big projects? Because I think we really have, the two biggest projects that I know of is going to be Desert Color. Mm-hmm. And then Tech Ridge at a certain degree. Sure. And then we have a bunch of small projects. And then we have the downtown plan. I know the downtown plan
that's going on right now.
We've poured hundreds and hundreds of hours into. Which one of those things, like what are, maybe put them in a priority list of like, hey, this is where I think that we're at.
So the downtown plan's mostly complete. The master plan is going on right now. We're updating the master plan. That's super important in as far as how we move forward and
because we have layers of zoning, right?
Yep.
We have layers of zoning.
Private
we have
property owners.
We have a master plan, and
Yep.
then we have a zoning ordinance that goes on top,
right?
That goes down to the actual parcel, right? The size of your lot.
So if you have a piece of undeveloped land, you can look at the master plan and know what is planned for that in the future,
long term.
And not have a question to say, well, what can I do here? Well, you could look at the master plan and say, oh, this is already master plan for this. If I'm going to do something different, then I'm going to have to go to the city council and make a change to the master plan,
which is something that's supposed to be difficult to do, right? It's set into the system to say, hey, we need to be able to look long term.
Right.
We're going to make the decision on that, and we're going to reevaluate the master plan. How often do they reevaluate the master plan?
So this is the first time since I've been on the council. So I'm going to say it's been 15 years, if I remember right, that has been done. And so it's good to look at it and update it from time to time to make sure you're still moving in the right direction.
Right.
But that's a task that you can't take lightly because, people are making plans way out, or development has finally reached somebody that has had open space, and now it's time for them to develop, and they need to know what they're dealing with. So that's one of the big things that's going on. Tech Ridge has been really fun to be a part of. That was obviously city-owned land that we come up with a vision and said, hey, what do we want here? I remember
Joe Boca coming back from city council.
Yeah.
So excited.
Yeah,
you could see his passion. I'm like, I like this idea too.
This is
and I was like,
awesome.
Joe, let's do it.
Yeah.
Right. So I've watched Tech Ridge, crawl down the road.
Yep.
But from the beginning, it was a complicated one, right?
Right. And again, there's a lot of unknowns there. Will this work? Will it not work?
Uh-huh.
We really love the vision that Isaac Barlow had and has. And, to bring tech in. Not only is he a developer, he has tech background. So that was a perfect fit.
This is business.
We looked at, the other respondent was probably the biggest developer in Utah, the Gardner Group. They were ready to go. They would have loved to do it. And the vision that Isaac had for Tech Ridge and the people he was bringing in, that's what we wanted to see. And the idea there is to try to create some tech jobs, which are typically higher paying. And try to boost the economy from that way and provide some higher paying jobs here in St. George. So I think it's going along a little slow, but it's going. Mm-hmm. And, there's some factors there that are within our control and some aren't. And we're hoping that it keeps going the way it's going. And it's starting to look really cool up there. First step in that was having Dixie Tech up there. And that's
I think
awesome.
That's
It's going to be an awesome fit.
We were able to replace Dixie with Dixie.
Yeah, there you go.
That was the best thing that could ever happen to Dixie Tech. Was like, oh, sweet, we only got one to compete with.
That's right. I love it. So we were just up there having an update from them last week, and they brought us up there and had their culinary school cook us lunch, and that was awesome.
Such a cool idea.
Oh yeah,
I love it.
And then get
Dixie
an update
Tech,
from them.
and they have a culinary program.
Yeah.
It's my favorite part about that school is it's like it says Dixie Technology. They're vocational school, right?
Sure.
They're like, let's teach people how to do work, like actually work. I love it. I love the idea.
It's probably one of the best meals I've had in a long. They made a steak that was. They said it was a sirloin, but for all intents and purposes, it could have been a fillet. It was awesome.
So good.
So it was so fun. Anyways, there's so many things like that going on. Let's see what. Desert. We have that whole undeveloped portion, desert color, desert canyons. There's a lot of planning that's going on there.
So much. I remember somebody told me that back in like 2009, or I guess it would be like 2007, because it was right before we really went into a foreclosure, market. We were starting to boom.
Yep.
And there was some talk around SR7 and that connecting and that development being like the next big, area.
Right.
And then the market went crazy, it just was obliterated, and it's taken us, almost 20 years to get back to that.
Yeah.
But that's still kind of the plan, right? It's like that corridor is really a bulk of.
It's kind of our last great open space for as far as the city of St. George. Yeah. The state line there. So that's our border. That's our natural border.
Yeah.
We've always, since, I've been on the council, we've always anticipated that St. George's build out is somewhere in the neighborhood of 350,000 people.
St. George itself.
Yeah. So we're
what would that make the county at that same point?
There. So the county is at that point is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, at that point, 500,000 plus. And that depends on hurricane and what happens there.
Depends on water.
Yeah. So
we don't
and
have water
fast.
over 350, right?
Well, when we figure when you take the master plan and the zoning that would go in those, that's a rough number of 300, 350. Now, if we start saying higher and higher density, that number can change, which is another discussion. As we talk about housing.
Should we go higher density? Because I'm a real estate agent. I'm pretty passionate about
not
the
everything,
housing stuff.
Not everything. And if you're a developer today, and I have great friends that are developers, what's your motivating factor? It's profit, right? It's profit. There's some of them, and most of them have a passion for what they do, and they want to build a good community. But if I buy a piece of property and I'm going to develop that,
highest and best use.
Yeah, and the higher density I do, the more money I'm probably going to make. And I don't blame them for that. But it just seems like in the last 4 years, plus or minus, everything has been a push to higher and higher density. So then the question that I try to ask myself is, when we're building these new communities, higher density is going to be really cool. Maybe it helps with the housing shortage, but what does that look like in 20 years, 30 years? Is that still going to be a desirable place to live? And if not, why? And how can we make it that way? And we've tried to say, let's mix it a little. So if we're going to do higher density, let's keep it not all in one central area. So we become what we've seen in some cities back east, which are, projects. We don't want to create that. So let's
projects mix. Though, like to be clear too, the projects were governmentally organized, like square boxes. Specifically, it was a project is what they would call them. Yeah. Is an individual project put forward by the governments in place to funnel social welfare programs and put everybody into a little square.
So design is important.
And we learned that was a mistake.
Yes.
Right? We've learned from that already. We already know that's not a good idea.
So design is, and that's something that I've learned in the last few years is, as we've visited with developers and gone through a plan, is higher density can be done nicely with design, some simple design things, which I'm not a designer and, that's not my forte, but I can look at something and say, hey, that's cool looking. And maybe it's not as, even though it's high density, maybe it's something that's still attractive. And that's what we want. So when we've done high density, that's what we've tried to say is, hey, how can we make this long-term a desirable place to live? So, and some simple design things have done that. So we've tried to make it opportunities for higher density and where it's appropriate, and then still saying, hey, you can still have a dream to live in a place maybe that's not as high a density. Maybe that dream will go away. Maybe the future generations, your generation and beyond, they're saying, no, I just want to go out and recreate. I just need a little place to spend some time. That's legitimate. Could happen.
Yeah, I think the surveys nationally is like, if you're 35 or under, you're not wanting to go mow the lawn.
Sure.
And do a lot of landscaping. Yeah. You want like, hey, what's the square footage I need for the vast majority of that demographic and younger.
Sure.
But 47% of our county is over 55. So it's 50-50.
There's still some of us out there that like a big, big yard.
We have in proportion to our county too, though, like Utah County or Weber County is probably a better county to compare us to. We got a lot of young families.
Sure.
And we have that need, there is that need for housing.
Sure.
And I agree with you. Density for density's sake is not good. And
you said it much better.
Yeah. Density for density's sake for sure isn't good. And what are the areas that we're going to go dense? And then how dense?
Right.
So
that's why when you go to Desert Color, it's what we've said is, hey, we can go more dense here. We can go higher here, because if you're moving there, you're not saying, well, you're ruining my neighborhood. You're going into that right up front, knowing what
exactly
you're
what you're getting into.
Yeah. So that's a great place to do that, right? There's no set established, this is the height, whatever. And,
we have a fresh slate that we can work with.
You know what's interesting though? We're already getting that down there. We're following the plan. There's, a new hotel condo.
Atara.
Yeah, that one. You were there. And we're already getting a lot, hey, you're ruining our neighborhood. We're getting that. I mean,
didn't they change they said they were going to do 3 lagoons.
Right.
Was the original pitch.
Yeah.
Sitla.
Yeah.
And there's not 3 lagoons anymore.
Right. So there are some changes there, and I agree with that.
So they're reneging on the original plan.
Yeah.
And for those of us that have been paying attention, I think that might be the louder voice than necessarily saying you're ruining our neighborhood. You're just saying you're changing the plan.
Right.
And the residents that are there, they're like, wait a minute, that's not what I bought into. I didn't jump in early to support the project for you guys to take a pretty big portion of what it was about. In their view, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Artara had full right to do what they did anyway, right? Because it's their property at that level.
Right. So that one that we were talking about last week was a simple change of moving it a little further down on the property. So, but that was always slated to be what it's going to be. And that's what that's at least I try to stick to, is saying, hey, I can understand if residents are going to be upset when there's a major change, and I'll stand up for them. But there are some things that when you talk about a master plan, you're talking about pretty big bubbles. There's going to be some tweaking in there, and so.
And that's the fear, I think, from people, too, is they're like, wait, you gave me this really cool design, but then when I look at that building, it doesn't look anything like the drawing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's some toughness. Because it's a lose-lose for you, because you're like, everything in all those meetings, I did the best thing I could with the information I had, and then now this has changed. I can't go back in time, right?
And then there's those development agreements in place where, you've said, okay, if you do this and this, you can do this, and now it's time to do it, and there's maybe it doesn't fit in as good, and how do we do that, and can we get the developer to agree to help us out?
Right.
And so it's hard. Growth in and of itself is hard.
So
look, there's so many places I used to play and have fun, and they're now houses that it's like, oh man, do they really have to build it? Yeah. 3000 East, for example, that kind of wetlands along there where there's all kinds of wildlife in there, and now we're putting that all in a pipe. It's like, oh man, it hurts me every time I drive down there, because I used to spend a lot of time there, and there's just a lot of cool things along there. Yeah. And so it is part of growth, and it's going to be painful, and you're going to miss out. And my children are not going to get the same St. George as, I had, and yours are going to have a different one than you have. And it's just part of the game. So the question is, how do we do it the very best? I think you're always going to find differing opinions on that. And that goes to our discussion that we've been having about how high we do buildings downtown.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was at one of the city council meetings. I think it's 300 West. It's the gas station. I think West Davis
on the boulevard.
On the boulevard, right?
Oh, Jean's OK Tire. It used to be.
Yep. So they propose a development similar to Jewel Plaza, and then I heard a statement, because you were wanting to drop the height because it was too tall, and he said, "Are we just going to turn everything into a concrete jungle?" Right? And I get your position, because you're like, at a certain point, I'm just sick and tired of the buildings, right? Because that's not, you were born and raised here,
but
man.
that's the feedback I'm getting as well.
Yeah. And it's a voice in town, right? You're speaking a voice in town. It's not just necessarily your opinion, but ultimately. That height, what was the height difference? Because it was approved, but what's the height difference?
Right. Actually, the height starts almost getting it's maybe 5 or 6 feet, and then it comes down to stories. So what, how many stories versus what's the height?
Right.
And that's where the argument came in and I don't know, is it 4 stories? Is it 5 stories? I'm not an expert on that. And what's going to feel like it's too tall? And that's what it comes down to. I mean, you're going to differ on that than I am. And so we've tried to come up with saying, okay, part of our downtown master plan is to say, we want to be able to sit in certain areas and still see the red hill, the black hill, the sky. And so they call them view corridors. How do we do that? The only way you're going to do that is just not say everything that we piece of land that we redevelop, if it's 6, 7, 8 stories, we're not going to have that. Yeah. So that's just a conscious decision that we've made. That's painful. It's painful that for longtime friends of mine, the Whitworths, the boulevard, that the hotels along the boulevard they own Boulevard Home Furnishing. They wanted to build a new motel right there on the boulevard, 7 stories high, world-class reception center and conference center. And
no dice.
We're saying no.
Yeah.
And they don't like that. And these are people I've known my whole life. And, they're good Santa Clara people, and St. George businessmen. And it's very hard. And so,
So 7 stories, like we've gotten to a point, because somebody told me, you could correct me, because it sounds stupid. I know it does, as I'm saying it. The original was, we're not building anything taller than the temple.
See, and I've been hearing that since I got elected to the council. I have never heard that in any of our discussions, or never seen it. There was a height limit of 35 feet, I believe, And it was due to the fact that how do you get we didn't have the fire trucks to be able to get higher than that.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to have a ladder truck that goes as high as your tallest building,
right?
Or
Makes
you
sense.
cannot provide adequate fire protection. That was how it was explained to me. No one ever said anything about the temple. Ever since I've been on the council.
But then you fast forward and you say, okay, well, there's buildings that have adequate fire protection that are...
Well, now we have different fire trucks too. We have
technology's changed.
Yeah,
and
there are higher buildings in the temple now.
Somebody told me, a lot of the issues with zoning and setback rules were specifically because of the fire truck, right? And these rules were set when St. George was from like 1920 to 1970.
Right.
Nothing changed in St. George, right?
Right.
Where this is where the rules were started, and then now as we've progressed so fast, so quickly. What are the things that we pull back on? What are the things that we say, okay, this was a development knot that we could probably unwind and allow the market to, they don't necessarily have to go 7 stories because there's more options for them to develop, right?
That's what we're trying to do is try to come up with things that a developer, when they buy a piece of property, can know that they can do and try to use that property to its highest and best use and not exceed what's going to make our downtown just a bunch of tall buildings, which there are people that say, hey, that's just the future, man. Get over it. I'm prone to saying more and more, well, we're St. George. We're not such and such, which you're saying you want to be like. Mm-hmm. We're St. George, and we're trying to maintain that in some form, right?
Yeah, we're trying to hold on to. We got to hold on to our heritage.
What makes us St. George? Of course, we're a beautiful place to live. There's all the natural beauty. There's still another thing that people want to come here for because it's a safe place. It's a safe place, probably because of some of the culture, and that culture I'm not just saying the LDS culture, but I'm saying that culture of we help the Dixie
community.
Spirit. Let's call it the Dixie Spirit.
Community.
Yeah, we help each other.
Yeah,
that was a culture.
That's what Jesus taught.
There you go.
It's like love your neighbor, man.
Now you nailed it. Two great commandments.
Mandates. Love your neighbor.
Yeah.
Right. Follow God. Love your neighbor.
Yep. I was just recently telling someone that what I heard someone say in church the other day was the best way you can outwardly know who a Christian is how they treat their fellow man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's So you nailed it.
Paul's was yelling it at generations, right?
Yeah.
He's echoing across time for doing just that, right?
But that's the culture that came here. Whether you're part of that culture or not.
It's why we moved. My wife and I moving here. I'm like, it's a good place to raise a family. Like if we're gonna raise a family, Utah's a great place to raise a family.
Yeah.
There's no reason why the community cares about each other.
It's what we call the Dixie Spirit. Hey, we help each other, right? Those first settlers, that rained and rained and rained. They all got around. They shared a potato. That whole story, and let's try to keep that. Why not?
Yeah,
we can do it. We can still grow. We can still be a world-class city. We can welcome the world. We can have a little bit of everything, a little bit of something for everybody.
I think we can do that with 7-story buildings though.
And maybe we can, maybe we can. Again, that's something we can argue on. And we're having those arguments right now. I mean, you mentioned Wes Davis. I mean, he's having that argument and I don't blame him. And again, I think it would be wrong for us to say we know exactly. Mm-hmm. We're working on the best information we have, saying, will this change the nature of the downtown? And we get a lot of pushback on the Avenir, right there downtown, that building right close to. We tried something new, right? Mixed use, close to the sidewalk. I get a lot of pushback from that you've ruined the boulevard. I don't even want to go down there. It's too tall a building.
My favorite part about the boulevard is the Avenir.
Yeah, see? It's just a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then people imagine, well, if you do that all the way down the boulevard, what's it going to be like? You're going to drive down there and you're going to have to look straight up to see the sky. I'm just repeating what I hear.
Yeah.
But I was part of making that decision.
There's no reason to go down there if you're out there to see the sky.
I was part of making that decision to try something new. To try it.
89% of our county is going to be open land and space. 89%, no matter what. If we get to full build out, 89% is going to be open space.
That
federal government
there.
Right?
You got a point.
We have open space within minutes.
Yeah.
All over the place. Santa Clara Reserve, beautiful.
Yeah.
Please, the Red Desert Reserve. Aside from the turtles, please don't put buildings up there. Like we could stop.
What about the Northern Corridor?
The Northern Corridor. This is where I'm like, okay, for transportation purposes, how can we get clever? How do we get real? Think outside the box. Let's think long term. I can't see. I'm trying to imagine the human on the road going from Green Springs to Red Hills Parkway. Now with Black Desert, 16 restaurants, the massive convention center, all the stuff that they're doing right there on Snow Canyon. Ivans is probably like, please build that, right? Because they don't want the choke point to be Sunset.
Right.
Sunset was brilliantly done, by the way. The project on Sunset and Bluff, right? The over under, the ability to ride your bike. It's just that was a masterful.
Yeah.
It was funny because my wife at the when they first started the project, she's like, I have no idea. Like, where is everybody going? Like, how does this even work?
Yeah.
And it's I think they did an awesome job, but it only solved the problem for a moment until you have now Ivans, going the way that it will.
Sure.
So is there some uniqueness around it, but putting houses and businesses and things like up there versus just a road? I think those are a little bit different, right?
Yeah. There's no plan that I know of. There's no way to build houses up there because it is the reserve. There's no, but the
until it's not.
Well, yeah. And
things change, right? It's like,
I guess
I was told it's real estate.
That would have to be a federal issue because that's the deal they made way back with the feds, over the tortoise.
If Joe's still old Joe's in office, nothing's going to get done, right? When it comes to the federal government,
that northern corridor probably isn't going to go until that changes either. But that's a critical part. It has been part of the long range plan.
It's so crazy that they can control that from us, dude.
Now,
like the insanity is that Joe Biden, truthfully, the difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is the difference between us getting legal right to the Lake Powell pipeline, which is our legal right in the accords. It's there. Sure. It's our water. We had the agreements. Everybody was good. But because Joe's sitting in the seat and not Donald Trump,
right?
St. George potentially might not have water. That's one person. And we didn't even get to vote. Our electoral didn't matter. No. Didn't matter who we voted for. That's wrong.
And that will be another one of our natural limits is at some point, you talk to the Water Conservancy district, at some point and we talk about it now. What is that time? We keep asking the water district, hey, when is that time? And that story changes depending on conservation and how we reuse. And it's going to change a little bit right now because of this great water year we're having. But that, we know that's going to be a cycle. And so we've got to keep ahead of that. So I don't know what that number is, but a year ago they were telling us it's coming sooner than we think. And now it's, not as soon, but we're still planning ahead. The reuse system that we're putting in and all.
Is the plan adequate? You believe is the plan adequate?
That's
for the next 5 years.
Oh yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but at some point we are going to hit a limit. There's just no way around it.
But that was true. That was true.
Yeah.
When they settled Santa Clara, the dam went out. Like I was reading the history. I think the dam went out. I've said this a couple of times, so if you're listening and you're like, you keep saying this, Rob.
Right.
The dam keeps, in Santa Clara, almost every season it was getting washed out because of flash floods. And I can't imagine if we were two male adults and the dam went out, we'd be like, I got to build another dam. Because every man, woman, and child that could do it was out there doing it.
No, there's no question.
So we've always had that problem, right?
Yeah, we always will. But and that was I think that was the nexus for the Lake Powell pipeline idea is, hey, we've got water out there that we have a right to.
Yeah.
I think it's a brilliant idea. I think if I were, if I had the money and they would let me build the pipeline and I could invest all my money in that and then sell the water out here, I would do it in a heartbeat because I think it'll be worth every penny.
The craziest part about it is that it's still going to go back down. It's a renewable resource. Yeah. It is not a non-renewable resource. It will go right back to where it was. Yeah. It's going to go to Lake Mead anyway. Yeah. I don't know why California and Nevada care.
Right.
Because ultimately, once the flow is going, they're still going to get the water.
Yeah.
We're going to clean it and then send it back down the river. By the time it gets to them, it'll be fine.
Yeah. And so
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And that water, this is the other thing I think people don't understand. That water that's coming to us is actually coming from further upstream.
Yeah,
it's not just
vernal.
It's not just what's sitting in Lake Powell.
Yeah.
It's that water. And I can promise you, the moment that we say we're no longer going after that water, there are other water districts in Utah that will be going after.
They're going to go out. Yeah, exactly. Because it's a right.
The Weber, water district, they're waiting for that. I've heard that through various sources. They're waiting. They're saying, okay, as soon as you say you don't want it, we want it. Because there is pressure on water from not just for us in our city, but there's pressure on agricultural water. I mean, that's something that's going across the state is, we need to take more from ag. All those things. There's pressure on water everywhere. And so if they can get it from somewhere else, they will get it. Mm-hmm. And so we are very short-sighted if we do not tap into whatever water sources we can. Whether or not we need it all right now or not, we will need it. Yeah, think if they would have said, well, we got plenty of water here in these little springs. Let's not build the pipe from Pine Valley or build the ditch, which is now a pipe. I mean, we would be in severe. Those people were so forward thinking, and then you
go up to the vortex, and you can see the canal still. And the pioneers literally took pickaxes and cut this thing here. It's just crazy.
Even Gunlock. My stepdad, and we had a little farm down in Green Valley. When I was growing up, we worked on that farm. But there was a time when, before I came along, that they come along and said, "Hey, we want you to turn your water right back in to us so we can build this company and build this reservoir," because they would historically run out of water towards the end of summer because that water would dry up. And they said, "We're going to build this reservoir, but you've got to give us your water rights, and then we're going to give you shares back." Mm-hmm. And he used to tell me, he passed away at 99.
Some quick talking salesman's like,
and he was like, wait a second. I don't know. But he said, I finally realized that was better than what I was doing, which is my crops would dry up. Mm-hmm. And so he did it. What if they wouldn't have? What if they just said, no, that's my water, I'm keeping it. And so Dixie Spirit, they cooperated, built the reservoir.
That's the beauty around the state having the mandate over water. Yeah. I honestly, coming from California, and they privatized their entire water system. Yeah. There's certain things, unalienable rights in the Constitution. Life, liberty, and property. Yeah. But guess what? We all die if we don't have water.
That's right.
Within just a short amount of time. So water is a right. It's got to be. So for me, like if you really like as a fundamental, water, we'll die if we don't have it. Food's really important, and then shelter is really important. Yep. So looking at the city government and the role. Yeah, dude, they get it. You need to stand up.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I got there.
It's almost 4 o'clock.
I start feeling like I'm slouching, so I had to sit back.
We're almost at 2 hours. Almost at 2 hours. So I could keep going. So you tap out when you're done.
Well, I have another appointment at 4:30, so I'll have to leave. I'll have to be done about 4. But I can come back anytime you want.
Okay, so let's finish this one thought, right? Okay. So like with the water, I appreciate how important that it is. And I think everybody's on the same page with it, like locally. Mm-hmm. I hate hearing ads in Nevada and California about how Utah's mismanaging their water, which there was a time where we weren't counting it correctly. Mm-hmm. I think it's silly that we have 16 golf courses and 4 of them are owned by the city of St. George. I didn't even know this until the other day. St. George City owns 4 golf courses. Doesn't make sense to me.
That was an economic decision made by some brilliant people back when this was just a speck on the map.
Because of why? We wanted to drive what?
Tourism. Bring people here.
Should we have drove tourism to St. George or local businesses and economic development? What should have we have done if we were to put our cards?
Well, the tourism helped build local business.
Fair enough.
I think it was a brilliant decision if you're okay with growth. If you like the idyllic life that I grew up in and you weren't worried about money, then you would have said, "Oh, we wish you wouldn't have done that because we'd have been this sleepy little town, and please don't bring I-15 through town and through the gorge, which is where my father lost his life."
I remember. I'm sorry about that.
No,
by the way,
no, that's But if we wouldn't have done all that, then this would have been a cool little place, just like Mayberry, and nobody would care to come here, and you'd grow up and have a wonderful life.
That got lost, right? Like it would be that town. Yeah.
So to me. Those guys were making a decision. They're businessmen saying, how can we bring more people to build our business up?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. And so they did the golf courses. It worked.
It worked.
And then, so now, then the question is,
it worked.
What are we going to, there's some talk about, how do you close down the golf courses now? There's a whole lot of other ramifications from open space to water to all those things that we talk about.
It's like, how do we transition them? Mm-hmm. They don't make money.
And believe it or not, we've talked about that. We've been talking about that since I've been on the council, and we actually got way down the road of leasing them out. Why would you lease a golf course if you're not going to make a ton of money?
It's not going to make money. So, but then it's like, okay, you look at Black Desert. So then we say, okay, if we're going to rewind some things, because I don't want to go into the golf courses because we could take forever on it. My thought would be is if tourism worked and it had its place, and we say let's pump the brakes now on that, and how do we refocus in economic development?
Sure.
I think that's where like
you're on.
How do we facilitate that?
We don't need to beg people to come here anymore. We don't.
Nope.
We don't need, and we're still running these ads, and part of the
we don't need. Hold on, maybe we don't need people to come here for businesses or for tourism. Beg people to come here. Period.
In general, I kind of think a little of both, because if you're a business owner and you see the quality of life we have here, and you can move your business anywhere, you're wanting to come here. Now, we still have that, little economic carrot that we try to offer to those businesses that have a higher than typical pay. We want those kind to come here. So we'll give them some incentive, not forgetting our existing businesses. There's still incentives for them as well. So yeah, let's let's do some of that. But do we really need to run ads to say, hey, come visit St. George?
The Big Five ad campaign that worked brilliantly.
So right now, there's a requirement that we spend a certain portion of that transient room tax, the TRT they call it, on advertising. And we could do some other things with that money if the state would rewrite that and say, hey, we can use that for some infrastructure, for some, if we really want to build some more baseball fields, soccer fields, those kind of things.
Or subway system.
There's a lot of money that's being collected by
the
tourists, not the local taxpayer.
The tourists are going to benefit from the subway system where you could jump in, you're on St. George Boulevard and pop up in Springdale.
I'm going to have to think about your subway system. Just the sheer cost versus the ridership. I don't know. Well,
it never makes money. But we go back to the point is like public transportation, and it was said in the City Councilman, it's always going to lose money. It's never. So whether it's in the black by a long shot, $35 trillion currently is our national debt. 35 trillion.
Yeah. No, I see your point there.
The economy's built on debt.
If you're going to lose money anyway, where's the best place to lose it?
Where's the best place to? How do we preserve the heritage?
It's an interesting thought.
How do we preserve as much as we can?
I hear you. That's awesome.
I want to have you back. I want to have you back because I want to talk more about housing.
We didn't get into Switch Point and the housing.
Switch Point is what I even told you that was my first point.
I have some great stories for that too. So
Switch Point is the best thing, man, that I think you're a part of, and I'm so grateful that you've pushed it. And Carol, like the team that you were able to collaborate with, has exceeded every expectation that coming from outside the area and saying, hey, I wonder how they do in this area about carrying the Dixie spirit.
Yeah.
Man, you guys nailed it.
No,
Switch Point's so good.
It's a great story. And I hope you'll have me back.
I'll give them my money.
Talk about that.
Yeah.
I hope because that's just such a great story and I've just been fortunate enough just by virtue of my position here to just be there and learn and see it and be a part of it. It's probably one of I'd have to say it's the best thing about what I've done on the city council, and just by sheer being here is why it's happened.
Yeah, man. I think I know
didn't do anything
I've heard this from multiple people. I've heard this from multiple people though, that you had a very pivotal key role in its success, and so I want to give you a shout out for that.
Because we hold the purse strings sometimes at the government, so some of that funding had to come through us. But other than that, there's people there that know what they're doing, and I'm just saying, hey, tell me what I should be doing, and so it's been fun. It makes me feel good inside just talking about it, because it's just when you've seen some of the stories and some of those people, and we're doing something that works there. So let's have me back and let's talk about that sometime.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep promoting it out, and man, this was good, dude. I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
It's my pleasure. So
okay, thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good day.